Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda. I am here with my weekly wrap-up, and before I get started, a couple of disclaimers. First of all, after a stretch of many very sunny but cold days in Oregon, we are back to our gloom, which means the lighting is really strange, and then of course my little tripod light is acting weird. That's it. Secondly, if you've watched my videos for any length of time, you know there's always weird noises in the background. There's a higher chance of those today because my husband he works from home on Friday, so he's always home when I do these videos. But my kids are also home because it's the end of their semester. They have today, Friday, and Monday off, which is great. It meant I got to sleep in, which means I'm getting to this at 11:15 a.m., which is also why I'm drinking tea instead of coffee, because at this point in time it didn't make sense to make a whole pot of coffee, so I made some tea, and I am drinking, if anyone's interested, I am drinking Harney & Sons Murder on the Orient Express tea. It is very good. It is like a spicy black tea. It's, if you like English breakfast tea, you'd like this tea, and you like a little spice to your tea. Anyway, so that's what's going on with that. I know a lot of people have said that January has felt really long, and it has felt so long. But you know, February might feel just as long. This is the world we're living in now. But one thing we can control is at least for right now, is we're reading. So let me get into what I have finished this week. I have finished 5 books, but I'm only going to talk at length 4 of them. And before I get into this, I will say I am so close to finishing Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I had hoped to have it done so I could talk about it in this video, but it's going to happen today. So I will talk about that when I do my monthly recap. Also, after the mail comes today, I'm going to film my January book haul, and just beware, it's going to be long, really embarrassing long. Anyway, back to what I have read. So, the first book I finished, and this was for Mariann at Books and Bocadillos for her book club, and this was The Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. I'm one of the last people in the group to finish this because I ended up getting a bit of a late start on it because of other things I had going on. So I won't go too much into the details. It's basically a family of 4. They're on a road trip from their home in New York City to southern Arizona. They're heading towards the Chiricahua area, which is, I thought, great because I have been to that area. That is not too far from where my father lives. I will show a picture. I'll stick a picture in here. This is my daughter. How old was she at the time? 10? And we're at Chiricahua National Park down there. It's not the best picture. You can't really see the columns and stuff, but it's a pretty awesome place to be. And it's not a national park I'd ever heard of until I went there. So, hey, there you go. Chiricahua. There's lots of camping and stuff there. It is high altitude though. So if both my daughter and I had a little trouble with the altitude, but anyway, they're heading to that area. So there's some things going on in this book. There is the road trip aspect. The father is going because both the mother and father, and the characters' names are like mother, father, boy, girl. And both the mother and the father, they do like soundscapes and things like that, which is not something I had ever heard of until I read The Examiner by Janice Hallett, because they do that in there too. So they both do that as a profession, but the father's going down for his own project, which is to talk about like the Apache and their culture. And the mother is going down because she had an acquaintance whose 2 daughters had come over the border and were detained, and she wanted to know what happened to them. So the mother is trying to figure out what happened to these 2 girls for this other mother. And then the boy and the girl, who are 10 and 5-ish, 6-ish, are obviously along for the ride. So we have road trip, we have indigenous issues, and we have immigration issues, and we also have a marriage which is falling apart. So all that's going on. The book is told from basically 2 viewpoints, that of the mother and that of the son, of the boy. And so you get 2 different voices, and I thought Luiselli did a really good job of differentiating those voices. A lot of times when there are multiple voices, it's like the voices and the author uses for the book don't sound any different, and these sounded different. So that was great. However, I did not quite understand the boy's voice because he's 10 years old and he simultaneously felt too old and too young to be 10, which was weird. I am someone who loves road trips. I love to go on road trips. And so that really appealed to me. And as I said, they're going to an area of the country that I know. And so that also was very interesting to me. And about 2/3 of this book were great. When they're talking about from the mother's point of view, it worked great. It felt a little cluttered. I did feel like there was a little much going on, but it worked okay for me. And then we switched to the boys' viewpoint. And that's where it lost me a bit, because it even felt even more crowded for what it was. But I also didn't trust the voice. I didn't say I didn't trust the voice. I didn't find the voice authentic. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag for me. As I said, the first 2/3 or 2/3, 3/4, something like that were great. But it just, at the end, it kind of didn't work for me very well. But I'm really glad that I read it. And I would probably still recommend this to people who are interested in those sorts of things. I probably would say this is probably not going to be the best book you've ever read, but you may still really enjoy it. I do think that Luiselli, I keep saying her name wrong. Luiselli is a very strong writer, and I would read more from her. So that was Lost Children Archive. And then I finished Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. I actually had not planned to read this book this month. I had read everything that was on my TBR, and then when I looked at my pile of possibilities, nothing called to me. So I pulled this off the shelf. It's book of the month. I got it for my December book of the month. And the thing about Alice Feeney is people are either Alice Feeney people or they aren't Alice Feeney people. And I thought I was an Alice Feeney person, and now I'm not sure I am. I have read 3 of her books. This is the 3rd book of hers I read. The first one was Daisy Darker, and then I read His and Hers, and then this one. And Daisy Darker, there's elements of Daisy Darker. I don't want to spoil anything, so I will be vague, but there's elements of Daisy Darker that I appreciated. I understand why it didn't work for some people, but for me, I appreciated those elements. So that book really worked for me. And I liked His and Hers as well, too. I thought His and Hers was a little more mainstream, I guess, but I still enjoyed it. And then we get Beautiful Ugly, which I would say sort of as between mainstream and Feeney. It's kind of between Beautiful Ugly, or it's between His and Hers and Daisy Darker. So there are things that I loved about this book. The sense of place in this book is fan-freaking-tastic. I want to go to the Isle of Amberley. I don't even know if it's a real isle. It doesn't matter. I want to go there. It is so well drawn and so evocatively described. You feel like you're there. Feeney does a great job like drawing out the eeriness. This is it's shiny, so it's drawing out the eeriness, and I really appreciated that. This is kind of reminds me a little bit of a Stephen King plot in that it deals with an author who's struggling. So the setup with this is that Greedy Green, he's waiting for the call from his editor or publisher saying that he's a New York Times bestseller and he wants his wife, Abby, home with him when he gets the call. She's not, he calls, but she's on the road and she's like, oh no, there's someone in the street. And he's like, don't get out of the car, don't get out of the car. But she gets out of the car and then she disappears. And then we're a year later, we don't know what's happened to Abby, and Grady's life has fallen apart. This is very Stephen King-ish. He's just in sort of that author aspect, because he's done a couple books like that. Not that I've read them, other than Misery. I have read Misery, but that's sort of like a Stephen King-ish kind of plot. And that's just an observation. That's not a knock against this book. His agent, who he got through his wife, says, you know, your life is a mess. Like, he's like lost his house. He's like drunk all the time. He can't sleep. He can't write. And his agent said, look, I've been left to this like writing shed by this other writer on this island off Scotland, Isle of Amberley. Why don't you go there for 3 months and try to get your life back together and write something? So he goes over there, and when he's there, he starts seeing women who look like his wife. That's the premise of this book. And I enjoyed my time with this book. So I'm going to put that out there because now I'm getting into my critical parts of this book. As the book went on, I started to think, I feel like this is starting to get a little out of Alice Feeney, the author, not Grady, the author, Alice Feeney, the author. I started to feel like it's starting to get a little bit out of control for her. Like she doesn't quite have a grip on what's happening because things just start happening and I don't want to say they don't make sense, but they're starting to seem more and more far-fetched. And when we start getting to the resolution of the book, my feelings were correct. Or at least for me, I really felt like it fell apart in the end. I was like reading it going, huh? Really? That was sort of my reaction to a lot that happened at the end. So I don't know if I'm an Alice Feeney person. I'm gonna be honest. I think if you like Alice Feeney, you're gonna really like this book. If you don't know if you like Alice Feeney and you want to give it a try, I would not recommend starting with this book. I would actually recommend of the 3 books that I've read. Someone who's read more of Alice Feeney could probably tell you a better place to start, but of the 3 I've read, I would say start with His and Hers before reading this one or Daisy Darker. To me, it felt like it kind of fell apart. So that was Beautiful Ugly. And then I finished, finally, the audiobook of Lovely One by Ketanji Brown Jackson. So Ketanji Brown Jackson is the newest Associate Justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. For those of you who don't know, she came to the Supreme Court in 2022. She was appointed by Joe Biden. She's also the first African-American woman to serve on the Supreme Court. So she's going in with a lot of history. And this is not the first Supreme Court memoir I've read. When it came out several years ago, I read My Beloved World by Sonia Sotomayor and really loved that. So I was all for reading another one. In a lot of ways, this is like My Beloved World. It's not, she doesn't talk about the law that much. So if you're looking for like her judicial philosophy, you're not really going to find it here because that's not what this book is. It's just a memoir of how she got to where she is. And it starts from when she was a child. You know, she was born in Washington, D.C., but she grew up in Miami, Florida with parents who were on both of them. Both her mother and father were the first ones in their families to get college degrees. Her grandparents had been sharecroppers. So, you know, they've gone through Jim Crow. She's really at that generation that's that first sort of growing up. She's a little bit older than I am. She's a couple years older than I am. But growing up in the South of that, as she describes it, like the first sort of generation to grow up in that post-civil rights area. So that was really interesting in that. She is a spitfire of a person. She is like, yeah. She's a spitfire. She talks about, you know, she got into drama as a kid and speech and debate and music. And lots of times when she talks about music on the audiobook, I listened to this, by the way, I don't know if I said that. She sings it, so that's really fun. And then she's able to go to Harvard University. She goes to Harvard, and that's where she meets her husband, who is actually Caucasian. So she talks about the dealings with that when they decide that they're going to get married. There are issues that they have to confront because he's from a Boston Brahmin family, so he's like old blood Boston. But also, she doesn't come out and say this, but it's pretty obvious. He's from a pretty wealthy family. Like they go to the family vacation home in Spain, sort of thing. And he's from a wealthy family. And she's not. And so she talks a lot about, you know, they're going to have to work through those things. Her husband is also a doctor. He, you know, became a doctor, but he is now a doctor. So there's the challenges they have of both being in 2 high pressure jobs. She was, you know, attorney and became a judge and now is on the Supreme Court. And he is a surgeon and raising children with this. And I found all that so well described and discussed. The part that really, really stuck with me with this book, which I didn't really expect, I would have thought it would have been more of her career progression and how she kind of came up really from like Sonia Sotomayor, from like the bottom up. She wasn't like a rich white person, let's be honest here. And I really thought that's what would get me with this book. And that is interesting. That is all there. But what really, really sticks with me is the discussion of parenting a neurodiverse child. Her older daughter, Talia, is autistic, and they had a lot of challenges with that. I mean, for a lot of reasons. One was at the time that, she's in elementary school, kind of that, younger elementary school age, autism still wasn't something that was as widely known about as it is now. Both she and her husband are very goal-oriented, intelligent people that know how you work hard to get where you are. And the fact that their daughter faced such challenges with that was really an issue as well. And the different things they had to do with schooling, but also having, how are they going to raise these two? They have two daughters, so this is their older daughter. If they're both working so hard, and all those discussions. She also talks about her younger daughter who is not on the spectrum. And, it's hard when you have a child that has some special considerations for whatever reason. And then you have the other one who's sort of the easy child, in that you don't have these extra challenges with them. How does that affect them? She goes into all of that. And as a parent, I just love that. And I loved how she, was willing to accept her own shortcomings in this, and where she felt like she may have failed. I don't think that she failed. I think she did the best she could, but I also understand why she feels like she failed, because that's the way parents are. I thought that was just amazingly well done. The audio is fantastic. I highly recommend this on audio. As I said, she narrates it. She has a speech drama debate background, so she does a really great job with it. She sings when they talk about music, but in the last part of it, you start getting some other things. Like, she talks about her older daughter who at her high school graduation, sang a cappella at the graduation ceremony, America the Beautiful, and they have the recording of her singing America the Beautiful. Her younger daughter, wrote this amazing, she's like, my daughter wrote this amazing essay for her, and for her application to Harvard. As a mother, I'm like, I'm sure it was nice. Everyone thinks their kids are spectacular and it's the best ever, right? So I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it was nice. No, it was a spectacular essay. And she has her daughter actually read it on the audiobook. When you get to the part where they talk about the nomination hearings for Supreme Court, they use actual clips from the hearings, including what Cory Booker said about her, which if you haven't heard, just will bring a tear to your eye. Fantastic. One thing I thought was really interesting though, was these she has these, so when she was in college or law school and she served on the Harvard Law Review, she served with Ted Cruz. She just mentions it. She doesn't talk about them. And then when she gets, I think, her first job at a firm in DC, she works with Amy Coney Barrett. These sorts of things. But the two that really stuck out to me was this one where she goes to a friend's wedding in Chicago. And she's pretty clear that she's just sort of, the seating arrangement. They just put the lawyers together, and they were so she ends up sitting with these two people from Chicago named Michelle and Barack Obama. She had heard of Barack Obama because of the Harvard Law Review. I don't even think he was a senator at this point. And she got to meet them, and they're wonderful. And she's talking about them. And then she says later, when he spoke at the Democratic National Convention, or when he was running for president, something when he's really on the national stage, she's talking to her friend whose wedding she was at. And she's like, yeah, at your wedding. And the friend's like, what? The Obamas were at my wedding? And she's like, yes, you sat me with them. And then she talks about the friend going through her wedding album, trying to find pictures of the Obamas. And she did. She found 2 pictures of the Obamas, and Ketanji Brown Jackson was in both those pictures, which I thought was a fun story. But the one that blew me away is she is related by marriage, and I do mean by marriage, to Paul Ryan, the former Speaker of the House, and he also was the vice presidential candidate with Mitt Romney, a Republican, very conservative Republican. Probably not MAGA, because he kind of hightailed it out of there, but he's very conservative. Yeah, Ayn Rand kind of Republican, libertarian. And when she was being nominated, not for the Supreme Court, but her first federal judgeship, that still has to be confirmed through Congress, he introduced her for her confirmation hearings. And he even said, look, we don't agree on politics, but she's a great person. And I was like, that is What a small world. Like, I don't even get it. But anyway, I don't do 5-star predictions because I think that sets it up. But I do remember saying early on in a previous weekly wrap up, I think this is going to be a 5-star. And I was right. This is fantastic. Go get it. I highly recommend it on audio. So yeah, that was Lovely One by Ketanji Brown Jackson. And so the next book I finished, if you saw my video on Thursday, where I talked from my books for the spirit, this is How We Learn to Be Brave. Let me get the whole title here, because I think I called it the wrong title in there. I think I called it How to Be Brave. This is How We Learn to Be Brave, Decisive Moments in Life and Faith by Mariann, Edgar, Budde. I finished this yesterday. I am going to do a books for the spirit video of it, and I actually thought about doing one today and throwing it up today so it would be there by the time this video goes up, but my print copy is on the way to me, according to Bookshop. So it should be here in a week or so. I don't know, however long it takes. I never know with Bookshop because sometimes they go to this distribution center, like, I don't know, in Nebraska or something, and then it sits there for a while. So I don't know. At some point soon, I should have my physical copy. And it's just going to be a lot easier for me to do that video if I have a physical copy instead of trying to find my highlights in my ebook. So I will talk about that one in a separate video, as I said I would, but that video is still coming. I'm hoping to have it up next week. So that was the fourth one. And then the final book that I finished, I've been working on for a while, and that is this one. Divine Might, Goddesses in Greek Myth by Natalie Haynes. I do love me Natalie Haynes. This is a nonfiction by her where she talks about the major goddesses in Greek mythology, and she kind of does a deep dive on them in her usual sort of witty way of doing it. I can tell you she covers the Muses, Hera, Aphrodite, Artemis, Demeter, Hestia, Athene, and the Furies. And I did read this book, so I know what the heck it was my daughter was talking about when she started going off on Greek mythology. I enjoyed this. This is a good book. Natalie Haynes knows her stuff. She presents it in a very accessible way. She is funny. I might recommend this on audio more than print because of that. I will say, though, this is probably not an entry book to Greek mythology. It definitely does assume you have some knowledge about Greek mythology going into it, and some of definitely the major known tales, but even some of like maybe the lesser known tales, and sometimes even Roman mythology. I didn't have problems following it, but it definitely at times when it got to those points where there were things I wasn't really familiar with, I did really have to buckle down with it. So not something I would widely recommend. I would say you need to have a good basis of Greek mythology before getting into this. But if you like Natalie Haynes, definitely pick this up. Or even if you want to try it and you're not sure about the mythology part, if you have that background, get the audio because she's at least fun to listen to. So that was Goddesses in Greek Myth, Divine Might, Goddesses in Greek Myth by Natalie Haynes. And so that is what I finished. As I am recording this, it is January 31st. And as I said, I am going to finish Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. So you'll hear about that in my monthly wrap up. I am doing a lot of buddy reads and such for February, so I did want to finish a lot of stuff in January. Like I didn't want to carry a lot over. I'll be carrying some things over. I am doing 3 buddy reads, at least 3 buddy reads. I also started there's a group of us who are doing a very long, very slow and steady long read of Arabian Nights, 1001 Arabian Nights, Tales, whatever. And I did just start that. Like I read the first little intro bit of the book, like when it talks about who Scheherazade is and all that. Just because I needed something and I didn't want to start like another ebook. So I thought, well, I'll just start this a couple days early. But yeah, so there is that. I'm also going to, and if you watched my February TBR Pile of Possibilities video, which I will link down before, you saw I had February is African American month, and I am going to be reading Passing. By the way, classics catch up. I am, if you would like to join me today, as you see this, which is February 1st, I will be starting Passing, and we'll have discussion on it in my Discord, information down below. But I have a lot of African American books by African Americans and about African Americans up, and Black History Month, whatever. But in the past couple days, things have happened. Some federal agencies have been told to mute their African American history commemorations or anything about it as much as possible, which is wrong. So I am not going to read exclusive. I'm going to really lean into African American literature, especially African American historical fiction in February. I'm not going to read exclusively that because I have some other things going on, but I am going to lean pretty heavily into it. And I would invite you to do that as well. I am not someone who, as I say, I don't read whatever heritage this month. I don't, 100% of my reading doesn't fit into that. Even in March when I do my Bronte event, I'm not only going to be rereading Bronte books or books about the Brontes. And I firmly believe you should be reading authors of people, BIPOC, queer, all those authors, marginalized authors throughout the year. I do firmly believe that. But I think in move of this executive order, in this news, I would urge you, if you feel so inclined and if you are able to maybe lean into maybe the heritage months, especially African American right now, because that's the one that's coming up, or is by the time you see this video, but really lean into it this year because you're not going to get it elsewhere. They're trying to stomp that out, and that's not cool. So yeah, that was just my PSA for that. So anyway, that was my week. As I said, I am going to be filming a very big haul video. Yeah, I need to get that under control. So much for mindful book buying, but there were also some books that were like back ordered and pre-ordered that showed up. So it wasn't all like I lost it, but and yeah, so that's where I am. I'm going to leave this off. Yeah. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I hope that February reading goes well for you. Let me know what you're reading now, or if you have read anything that I talked about, what you think of it, let me know. And like, subscribe, join my Discord. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.